Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Thanks for joining us. Kicking off tonight. Now, earlier this week, we were shocked to hear our old friend Patrick Byrne of Overstock.com sounding a big alarm about the economy. Take a listen.
We're at the edge of a catastrophe. It's amazing to me that in the last 10 days, these economic numbers come out and people are saying, oh, we're disappointed. If they're disappointed, it means it means they bought into the lie that there was a recovery. There was no recovery. Everyone should be prepared for something very significant.
What are you talking about when you say be prepared for something?
Great Depression number 2.
Great Depression number 2. You think it's going to be worse than any recession that we've had since the Great Depression?
Yes.
Now, if Patrick is even partially correct about where we're going, we better start hunkering down. On the other hand, if he's way off, we may be able to make investments that take advantage of the general panic. Tonight, we bring together a couple of guys who have built extraordinary careers in business and investments because of their good judgments about the economy. If anyone knows what's coming and how to take advantage of it, it's these guys. Media investor Leo Hendry is a force in Democratic politics. He's also part of a group called Patriotic Millionaires for Fiscal Strength. We'll hear more about that in a minute. And Jim Rogers, you know very well, is a global investor and chairman of Rogers Holdings and author of A Gift to My Children. Gentlemen, what an honor to have both of you here. Thank you very much.
Nice to be here, David.
Leo, first you. You heard Patrick. Patrick has built a very successful business. Overstock.com is a great company, but he sees Armageddon coming. What do you say to him?
You know, I think Patrick's background puts him very close to the middle class, David, and I think that's what he's seeing. And I come from the same school of thought that the only measure that's important to me is sort of the vibrancy of the middle class.
Agreed.
I would actually be somewhat harsher than Patrick's assessment. I don't think we went up to come down. I think we've been largely in an L here. The real unemployment numbers are the ones that I focus on, not the official. And we began watching these numbers as long ago as '06, when we started to see the uncounted unemployed creep to being 1-to-1 with the counted unemployed. So I, for years now, literally almost 3.5 years, have looked at these numbers and said, for every woman or man that we think is unemployed officially, there's one who we don't count, but is just as unemployed.
Well, it's awful, but he sees something coming like the Second Depression. Do you see it as that bad?
I don't see it that way. I see a prolonged recession. I see certainly a jobless recovery. And I think that the tension that's underway now in Washington, David, between those who understandably want to cut the deficits, those of us who are more of the school of job creation, we've got to find something in the middle fairly soon. Both schools are right. Neither of us is right unto itself. And we've got to find something in the middle, both to appease this nation's sort of angst, but also to get something done here.
All right. Jim Rogers, you created a firestorm, which you always do whenever you come in town and start talking about things, saying that we are pretty much what Patrick Byrne says. We should be preparing, hunkering down for the worst to come.
David, we have had recessions in America every 4 to 6 years since the beginning of time. That means that by late 2011 or 12 or 13, we're going to have another economic slowdown. I don't know why or when, but it's going to happen.
Depression, like Patrick said?
Recession, slowdown. It's going to happen.
Do you think he was overstating the case?
I don't know. Let me just finish. Because what I'm saying is, what can Washington do? They can't quadruple the debt again. The market won't let them. They can't print that much more money. There are not enough trees in the world for Bernanke to print that much more money. So what are they going to do? The next slowdown is going to turn into a serious, serious problem because we've shot all our bullets.
Well, what about that? I mean, even Bernanke, who says, by the way, yesterday he said in his speech that we can't call this a recovery because we haven't had the sustained job growth. So this isn't even a recovery, according to Bernanke. But he said we're not going to do another round of money printing.
I think that bullet has, Jim is correct, I think that bullet's been shot. Where I have a tremendous amount of concern, David, is that I look at this overhang on foreclosures, on both the primary and the secondary mortgages, sort of the vacancies of housing. I don't see a scenario where oil prices abate, which is a big drag on the economy. So short of an intervention by somebody, and I pray it's a combination of the public sector and the private, because I think it has to be both this time. I am much pessimistic. I haven't been this pessimistic for a long time because I think we shot an opportunity in the foot. I think there was such a common purpose post-inauguration around the creation of jobs and the reformation of the financial side of our economy. And we sort of pooched both of them, sort of punted on both. And here we sit
You think we didn't do enough the first time? Is that it?
Not at all, and it was ill-conceived.
But wait, Leo, we did the wrong thing. We bailed out Wall Street. We
Well,
bailed out you. We bailed out guys like you in financial times.
Absolutely.
That was a terrible mistake.
A terrible package.
We should have.
And absolutely, Jim, couldn't agree more.
We should have let them off. It would have been terrible
But
pain.
Leo, aren't you saying that we should have spent more money than we did, or printed more money in order to spend more money? Because it's not there. We have to print it to make it.
I think we fail to understand, Dave, the distinction between creating jobs and sort of these palliative responses. I'm not a believer in these sort of $500 checks because I think while they have humanitarian outcomes, they don't create
the kind
jobs.
of rebates. They call it a tax. It's a tax refund, essentially.
Yeah, I argued against them when
program.
President Bush proffered them, and I argued against them when President Obama.
Way back to Jimmy Carter, as a matter of fact. They never worked.
They're not stimulus. The only stimulus that's important to me is, does it create jobs, which was, I think, the overhang on the inauguration that most immediately called for attention.
Does the government ever create jobs?
Oh, sure. And when the problems become as acute as they are today, give you a number. There's 5 million out-of-school unemployed youth that are not readily going to be accommodated by any private sector initiatives. Yet they overhang this society and this economy greatly. So there are programs. I'm not saying that this only can happen at the governmental level. There's no confidence in the private sector. They're sitting on their hands.
Well, there's even less confidence in the public sector, right, Jim?
I would agree. I don't know that the government creates jobs. Yes, they make work, but that does not make us more competitive. We've got to compete with Europe, Asia, South America. Those people are creating real jobs.
We also, by the way, have to sell our debt. We have this huge overhang. Now, when you say the debt, I know people's eyes glass over, but the fact is that the government is spending money it doesn't have. They have to, in order to pay for expenses, they got to sell debt. The Chinese are beginning to balk a little, aren't they? You live in that area of the world.
Their eyes may be glazing over now, but they're going to stop glazing over in a few months or a few years when we have a serious crisis.
Well, in just a couple of weeks, the Fed is going to stop buying the debt. The Fed has been buying, the Federal Reserve Board, our central bank has been buying about 85% of the debt that the Treasury makes over the past 8 months. They're going to stop doing that cold turkey in just a couple of weeks. When that happens, how are they going to sell the debt without raising rates?
Let me say again, we've got a crisis coming. We've got a semi-crisis coming, if nothing else, because we're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world.
Leo, how do we solve this?
You know, I thought we laid a ground plan to do it, David. I thought in the 2008 campaign, we said that the solution was going to be found in trade reform, in sort of attention to employment, and in tax reform. And I sit here 29 months after the inauguration, feel like we've failed on all three counts.
Let's take tax reform specifically. Does that mean raising tax rates?
No, it can't in this economy. What it does mean is fixing the platform we have now.
By the way, the way that Simpson Bowles did it, lowering tax rates across the board and getting rid of deductions.
Well, I'm actually a believer in the VAT. I think that with so many
value-added tax,
the value-added tax, I think that we sit out there among our competitors on the trade side, and so many of them have the VAT and we don't. I've lived, as Jim has, directly and indirectly in the corporate tax world. It doesn't work as it's structured. I'm a believer in more progressive taxation on the individual side. So there's a fairly dramatic reform underway in my world. But the one thing we do have to do is put confidence back into the corporate community, which doesn't exist today. We have to take away the incentives to move jobs overseas and replace them.
How do you do that?
Well, our tax code today actually incents the multinational corporation to move jobs overseas. Just change.
Everybody's running away. So how do you change that? Do you just lower the corporate tax rate?
Well, I think you lower the corporate tax rate, and actually I would substitute the VAT, as I said. I think the VAT would be a big inducement.
Really big on the VAT. I got to tell you, the reason, Jim, that Milton Friedman hated the VAT, that's a value-added tax. Everything you buy has a little tax that goes to the federal government. He hated it because it works so well, because it's so effective, and governments get greedy. Once you have a VAT, it starts at 1%, then it goes to 2%, and eventually you're up to 10, 20% VAT tax.
But David, in America, we tax savings and investing. We do not encourage people to save their money and invest for the future. We encourage them to spend. We should change that. We should tax spending, tax consumption.
So you're agreeing?
I agree. We should tax consumption.
It doesn't. Milton's fear doesn't strike a fear in your heart.
He's right. It does. Then all the people in the black market would have to pay taxes every time they bought a Mercedes. They'd have to pay taxes. Right now, they get away with the taxes.
By the way, are you for that in addition to the income tax?
No. I'm
getting rid of the income tax.
income tax.
You are. What about you,
No,
Leo?
getting rid of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're both in agreement.
Yeah, I would
on
get
that.
rid of it. I would be extremely sensitive to its implications to the middle class. The exemptions on the personal side have to be very cautiously addressed. But on the corporate side, I would substitute
Well, if
that.
you have some president and Congress coming in saying, look, first, we're going to get rid of the IRS and we're going to substitute it with something like this, I think politically that might be palatable. But you have to say, first, we're going to get rid of the IRS.
Oh, well, of course. But think of all the hundreds of billions of dollars spent in this country doing your income taxes and evading your income taxes or avoiding your income taxes. This is insane.
All right. By the way, we got to wrap it, but I have to ask both of you. I thought I was going to get a little light at the end of the tunnel from you, Leo, but you think the economy is going to get a lot worse before it gets better?
I don't see the scenario, David, where it gets better. I don't see that external event that's going to drop out of the sky and turn this around.
We've got a crisis coming. This is very serious. I hope everybody listens.
Jim Rogers, Leo Hendry, great to see you both, gentlemen. Thank you very much.